Hey, good morning, everyone. Just wanted to do a broadcast this morning for everyone. Normally I do, well, I can't say normally. Things have been a little sporadic lately. I want to just check my audio before I go any further. And a couple of stories I want to talk about this morning, but give me 2 seconds to check my audio as I'm using a different setup entirely. Yep, well, it says I'm live. Let's take a listen and see how live is live, if my audio is good. Yeah, good. All right. So good morning, everyone. A couple of news stories that I wanted to cover this morning, just as a bonus show for everyone. Normally, I would try to do a bonus show for patrons, and I just wanted to get this in because I missed you all last night. As you can see, I'm broadcasting from different studios, but that's not the point. The point is we're here. And some stories that are very interesting that I had to talk about this morning. It just came out that a federal judge just ruled that Black Lives Matter cannot be sued. I don't know if you've been following this, but there was a police officer from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, who decided to sue DeRay McKesson specifically and Black Lives Matter in general because of an injury that he received after being hit by a rock. Yes, during a protest. Now, okay, he got hit by a rock, so I shouldn't make light of that. But he wanted to sue Black Lives Matter, and to me, this wasn't so much about the injury as much as it was about trying to use litigation, to quiet Black Lives Matter. That's really what it was all about. And we see this time and again that people try to use lawsuits as a method of attacking or silencing people they disagree with. There's a lawsuit right now of a journalist who identified a group of white supremacists and called them white supremacists, and then that journalist got sued for slander because the journalist had the nerve to call people who identify as white supremacists, but I digress. The point is, people regularly use lawsuits as a method of putting fear in the hearts of people. And so this is exactly what was happening with this police officer rather from Baton Rouge, who was attempting to sue DeRay McKesson and Black Lives Matter. So the judge ruled that this is a movement and not an official organization that could even be sued. Now, most of us knew that off jump, but it did not stop the police officer and the people backing him from trying to push this forward. And so now what they meant was to use this as a way of squelching and silencing the Black Lives Matter. Now this is actually going to embolden them even more, and I'm glad for it because now as a movement, they understand that as a movement they can't be sued. Now this is not we have to be careful of the political and the media narrative that tries to make it seem as though Black Lives Matter is inherently violent and that people who protest are inherently rioters. And that's what this lawsuit was also attempting to do. So I think it's great that we're at this point, and I believe the announcement either came late yesterday or early this morning that Black Lives Matter cannot be sued. But I think it's amazing, man, how people will use any method they can possibly imagine in order to. Good morning, Kim, and good morning, Isaiah, Robin. Good morning. It's amazing how people will use any method they possibly can to silence your debate, and it's just coming from people who simultaneously cry about free speech. Some of the biggest opponents to free speech are people who always cry for free speech. The best example and the most recent example would be Jeff Sessions. I believe it was on Wednesday. Jeff Sessions went on Fox and Friends, and simultaneously, in the same breath, he talked about President Trump's free speech and his right to complain or to discuss the problems with the NFL protests, but then he turns around and say that they shouldn't do it. So how are you going to, in one hand, celebrate your free speech while trying to take away the free speech of other people? What people don't like is the fact that you really have a constant collision of free speech, right? There's a constant collision of free speech where in the most recent case with the NFL, you have people who don't like the fact that the NFL players are using their free speech to protest. And it's always those same people who run around the country talking about free speech, free this and free speech that, who are trying to use litigation. In the case of Black Lives Matter, they're trying to sue Black Lives Matter into silence. So it's just a level of hypocrisy, and that is staggering but not surprising. And we have to be wary of it. We have to be cognizant of it, that people will try to silence your free speech in the name of their free speech. When in reality, what has to happen is everyone is going to be able to say what they want to say in the public square, and may the best man win. It's a situation where our free speech rights are in competition. And that's it. I mean, there's nothing more to it. So, yeah, you will have the Nazi who's able to say what he wants to in the public square, but then you also have Antifa who's able to stand there and challenge him in the public square. So that's just the way it is. And I love the fact that this judge has made this ruling with regard to Black Lives Matter, because it just further demonstrates that we do have these rights to protest, to free speech, even though we're sitting literally in the midst of an administration who wants to celebrate their free speech while taking away our right to free speech. So just to recap on that, there's a judge who ruled, I believe late last night or early this morning, that Black Lives Matter as a movement could not be sued. And there you have it. I'll definitely be taking any questions you guys have in the chat over here. Another story that just came out, there was a Baltimore Ravens national anthem singer who just resigned. So every team has their national anthem, for the most part, every team has a national anthem singer who is basically on staff. And Joey Odoms, he's a combat veteran who's also a professional singer. He's decided to resign from that position for the Baltimore Ravens. He sang every week at the M&T Bank Stadium. And he resigned initially. People thought that he resigned in protest of the players protesting. It's the black guy. And so some conservative groups were circulating it around that, see, here's a black guy. He doesn't support the Baltimore Ravens kneeling, and he resigned because of it. So Joey had to come back and post on his Instagram page and say that the reason he was resigning was because players, quote, fans who attack players for protesting, a right in which I fought to defend, but are simply not interested in understanding why, is the reason I am resigning. Funny how that works out. So the conservatives started passing this around saying, hey, we got us a black guy. He's a combat veteran, and he's resigning because of those no good football players taking a knee. And so he came back and reiterated it's because of this exact thing. People who were booing and people who would not even listen to the reason, the real reason. Forget about Ray Lewis. I won't say it this morning. It's mine. But the players who had a legitimate reason for kneeling in solidarity with Colin Kaepernick, his fans, the fans at that stadium were booing and did not like it, did not support it, and they had a tremendous backlash because of it. And so Joey, the national anthem singer for the Baltimore Ravens, resigned because he said, quote, someone once told me to always go where you're welcome. And he said that this is not an emotional reaction to recent events, rather an ethical decision that part of me regrets, but my core knows it is the right choice. So he resigned because he feels as though he's not welcomed, or at least the environment is not welcoming enough for him to stay there. I mean, think about it. Why would you want, if the majority of the people that you perform for every week loves the way you sing, but don't want to see your protests, don't want to even acknowledge your protest, and if you do protest, then they lose their mind, then you're not really welcome there. They love your art, but they don't love you. They love you as a performer, but they don't love you as a person. And I think this is something the NFL players need to realize. Of course, their livelihood, they have millions of dollars at stake, so the stakes are higher, but the fact is still the same. And Odoms, the retired veteran, he demonstrates this perfectly. People can love what you do and not love you. People can cheer you on as you're running up and down that field. People can cheer you on as you're singing and performing. But as soon as you try to express yourself as an individual and demand that you be respected as a human being and not just as a performer, people will turn on you. I mean, we see this all the time in sports, man. They love you when you're successful. They hate you when you're bad, but when you're not successful. But if you ever stand up for something you believe in and it runs counter to what they believe in, you would go from being their hero to being a N-word in faster than the speed of light. That just shows you the extent of, and people need to realize this. And I think, and again, I know football players have a lot on the line. I get it. But they need to really realize they're only as good to these people as they're willing to be silent about what's important to them. All they want from the football players is for them to perform, to shuck and jive, to run up and down the field. But don't be a human being with grievances. Don't stand up for injustices or stand up against injustices, because as soon as you do that, they show you your real value to them. Same thing with the owners. That's where I want to transition to the owners. These owners, they have no interest in these people as individuals, not the ones that are telling them to be quiet, or the ones like the Dallas Cowboys owner who said that basically, I'm going to control your protests. A lot of people gave the Dallas Cowboys props because they got a photo of all of them kneeling. This was not during the Star Spangled Banner. This was, what's the owner's name? Jerry Jones, whatever the hell his name is. This was his method of controlling his team. This was him coming out. I swear when I saw this with the Dallas Cowboys, I swear this reminded me of one of the movies where the slave owner came out and put his entire slave plantation, all his slaves on display and showed them look at how good my slaves look, right? And sorry if you don't like the comparison, but that's what it reminded me of, right? So he came out there and he presented all of his team to the world saying, look at how good my boys are. And now let's all kneel and let's all take a picture together. You know, that wasn't solidarity. That wasn't unity. That was control. That was him saying, I have these boys controlled by money. Money controls them, and if they don't do what I say, then they will not get paid. I would have just as soon stayed in the locker room. I'm like, okay, you don't want me to protest or else I get fired, fine, I'll stay in the locker room. But what I'm not going to do is come out here and let you get this big photo op and get praise and adulations from Donald Trump for controlling my protests. So anyway, that's I haven't had a chance to talk about that specific instance this week, but that one really ticked me off because of all the things that were circulating about how he was going to fire his, or their asses will be on the line, I believe is the exact language, if they protested. And it's a means and a method of control. They want to control your protest. Not only control your protest, they don't want you to protest. They don't want you to be an individual. They want you to be a commodity. They want you to be a cog in their machine. If they feel like as though if they pay you, they own you. And unfortunately, in many cases, we see that's the case because the protest from the players has been controlled by the various owners. All right, a couple of other stories that I wanted to go over. Let's take a look, couple of feedback. Jerry Jones, that's what I thought. Thanks, Jason. Didn't he really say, this is from Jason, didn't he really say a year ago that he would fire anyone on the spot if they didn't stand for the anthem? And this is what I believe as well. I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but this is what Jerry Jones has been doing. And anyway, I want to talk about the quality of the team, because then I lose a lot of supporters, because I know there's a lot of Dallas Cowboy fans across the country. So I'll just leave the quality of the team alone. Maybe they're good this year. I don't know. I haven't been watching it because I'm protesting. I'm boycotting the NFL. Couple of other stories that I want to talk about. This story is fascinating to me. And I think it's fascinating just because it's fascinating, but it's also very important for two things. Fighting back against the stigma of that's attached to people who have HIV and AIDS, but also stopping the spread of HIV and AIDS. So the CDC has joined the consensus that a person who has an undetectable amount of HIV in their blood will not transmit HIV. So the shorthand version of that is, if HIV is undetectable, it is untransmittable. And this is a pretty big announcement. Now, people have been asserting this. Different groups have believed this and put this out for a while now. So I don't want to credit the CDC as if this is their discovery. The CDC is just now joining in with the consensus that has been standing. And what they did was they studied mixed status couples, a person who was positive and another person who was negative. And they studied them over a period of time, and they found that if the positive individual did not have a traceable a detectable amount of HIV in their blood, then they would not be able to transmit it. Now, obviously, for anyone who's still in the game out there with different partners, still wrap it up, right? Let's put that at the top. Still protect yourself. But for couples and for other individuals, like this is a huge deal, because there's a huge stigma with HIV. I don't have to tell you that. I think anyone who has ever had to go get an HIV test knows the stigma. When you sit in the clinic, or you sit in your doctor's office, it's a huge stigma. It is, and part of the spread of HIV has been the stigma that it has in the communities, in the various communities, not just the Black community, but all communities. And that's been part of the stigma. That's been part of the spread. And with this announcement, it helps to do two things, right? It helps incentivize even more so than your already natural incentive to take care of yourself and get your medication and to do what your doctor says and get your levels to where they need to be, right? It incentivizes that, but it also will help people have a better understanding of how the transmission actually occurs, or in this case, how it does not occur. So, I mean, I think it's a wonderful. This is some of the best. When I saw it, I'm like, this is some of the best news that I've seen in a long time, because it's just the long-standing stigma of a person being HIV positive that has contributed to the spread of it. But then also, it just gives a positive outlook for individuals who may be HIV positive. It gives them the ability to personally have that reassurance that they could be in relationships. They can have, I mean, think about the stigma that's attached to it. Like, a lot of people don't even feel like once they're infected, they feel like they can't be in relationships, or they can't have families, because that's what's been driven in our heads because of how taboo it is in our society. And I think this announcement will help reverse that taboo in its own way, right? And again, like, as individuals, we have to be completely responsible as individuals for our own personal sexual health. It is our responsibility to make sure that we do what we have to do to protect ourselves. But fighting back against that stigma, I think overall is going to help stop the spread in the long run. And this is also going to give individuals who may be HIV positive an opportunity to enter into relationships without this stigma, without them having, I'll leave it there. But I think you should go read it. Look at the study that they did. And again, this was not the CDC who discovered this, but the CDC finally joined an ongoing consensus that if you have an undetectable amount of HIV in your blood, it is untransmittable, which, I think that's amazing news. All right. Wonderful news all the way around. Absolutely. I think it is great news. And I think it's something that that I honestly believe, I honestly know that announcement right there can change the game for a lot of people. And just think about, that means that a person who's HIV positive can have a family. I mean, that's huge. That's huge. So, you know, again, as individuals, we are individually responsible for our own personal sexual health, responsible for getting tested, and we should always be protected. If you're out there in those streets, take care of yourself. But in terms of the gross stigma that helps spread HIV, because it's the taboo part, right? If I were to give any additional commentary, it is when we treat sexuality, and we treat sexuality in general, but then sexually transmitted diseases, they create such a stigma and a taboo that people hide. They're not, people are afraid to talk about it. People are afraid to, I know individuals who, back when I was in those streets, some people didn't want to go get tested with me. I'm like, hey, if we're going to get into this relationship, let's go get tested. And it wasn't something that they wanted to do. So, it's like part of a mature, healthy sexual relationships is being able to discuss those things that for the longest were taboo. I mean, how many people get into sexual relationships and never even ask about their HIV status? I mean, a whole lot. And I think part of it was not just because, you want to just jump in the bed as fast as you can, but also because of the stigma that was attached to it. And I think this announcement actually should. I think this announcement should really be promoted to help change mindsets with regard to HIV and AIDS. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Even marriage, protect yourself. Please stop the DL. It's unfair. Be truthful, be open, be transparent, be responsible. You guys are all adults. I don't have to tell you that, but I just did. I just did. All right. A couple of other stories. So Tom Price, to shift gears from extremes. So Tom Price, the director of Secretary of the Health and Human Services, got in trouble this week over using military jets to fly overseas and using private jets here 8 times to travel domestically. He has come out and decided that he's going to pay for the cost of his tickets on those various flights. So they chartered private jets to get around the country. He and other leaders or other people inside of the HHS. So he's decided to pay for his portion of the seat of the flight, which is his seat. So the 8 flights that he flew on, plus the military flights that he took abroad, cost somewhere around $50,000 for his seat. I want you to think about what 2 things. We'll talk about how silly it is for him to think that he could get away with this. But look at what we're actually costing taxpayers when you have people in office who feel as though they are, I don't know, royalty. I don't know what Tom Price thought that now that he's part of the president's cabinet, that he can't take commercial flights like everyone else, like other leaders, like other senators, or take his own personal private jet, like not Donald Trump at this point because he's on Air Force One. But this is what happens when you have a sense of entitlement. And they have always tried to make it seem that poor people, Black people, we're the ones that have a sense of entitlement. And then you get examples of this time and time. And this is not just a one-time thing. You have plenty of examples of leaders, elected officials, politicians, as executives who fleece America for every dime because they have a sense of entitlement. They're too good to fly on regular planes like you and me, even though I don't like to fly. So not you and me, but you. And so it's a sense of entitlement that they feel like they're too good to get on a regular plane. So they chartered private jets 8 times domestically and flew on military airlines going across seas. So $50,000 just for his ticket. And now he thinks that that's enough for him not to get in trouble and to say, okay, we're never going to do it again. Now, Donald Trump is a terrible human being, but one thing he's not afraid of doing is firing someone. Clearly, that's his entire brand. I don't think Tom Price is going to make it probably through the weekend. We will see. But I think Donald Trump is going to get rid of him for 2 reasons. One, Donald Trump does not like negative attention being on anyone else in his administration but him. He is the poster child for any attention or any media is good media. Negative media is good media. It doesn't matter. That's him. And anyone, if you notice, anyone who gets the moment of spotlight, with one exception, that's his son-in-law. But everyone else in his administration, when Steve Bannon got some limelight, got fired. Reince Priebus, when some negative news came out for him, got fired. Anthony Scaramucci, he came in 10 days later, fired. You know, so Donald Trump has no problem firing people, specifically when they get more of a shine or when they get more media attention than him. So this, combined with the idea that he should be draining the swamp, which he isn't, but this is going to be the perfect opportunity for him to, one, fire somebody because they got more media this week than he did, and two, fire somebody to make his believers believe that he's really draining the swamp, when in reality, he's been filling it with nothing but Goldman Sachs employees, former employees, this entire time. So I don't know what the over-under is, but if I had to put money on it, I would say Tom Price will not be here in the near future. Couple other stories that I wanted to hit on before we go. So yesterday I covered, and I'm going hoarse here, apparently, guys, forgive me. So the tax policy that Donald Trump is pushing. Here's, I have to pause on this because it's easy to point out to you, my audience, that Republicans, conservatives who buy into this particular tax scheme, especially when it doesn't benefit them, but it benefits top 0.2%. It's easy for us to point out how ignorant they are. It's fun and it's easy. But the thing that I've been trying to figure out is, how can we, or is it even possible, to help these people understand that they have been conditioned and trained, almost like Pavlov's dog. Like they ring the bell of tax reform, ding, 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 and the poorest or middle class conservatives jump up and they cheer on behalf of policies that are going to hurt them, but help the top 1%. I'm sorry, the top 0.2%. Because this is really one of the biggest things that is going to happen in this tax code with Donald Trump is that he's going to eliminate the estate tax. And we talked about that on my show on Wednesday night, on the Late Show on Wednesday night. And I got into a brief exchange with a conservative today, and they were talking about how the death tax, the estate tax, but they call it the death tax, is going to hurt poor people and rich people alike. And I'm like, it's not true. That's not true. That's like verifiably untrue. The death tax, if you want to call it that, only applies to people who can leave millions of dollars to their children. There is no, first of all, most poor people can't leave anything to their children. So here's a poor conservative arguing with me about how the death tax is going to hurt poor people. And I'm like, the estate tax, but I'll call it death tax, fine. I'm like, bruh, you're poor. What are you leaving to your children? So how can you be taxed with a death tax when you don't make enough money to leave to your children? That's number one. But then number two, after I explained that to him, and then explained that it's only going to affect like the top 2%, 0.2% of Americans, then he was like, oh, well, we shouldn't punish success. I'm like, bro, part of the reason, I think this is a disconnect. We've been so trained, not just conservatives, but all Americans. We have been so trained to believe that the reason we cannot get ahead is because we didn't work hard enough. And the ironic thing about it is the hardest working people in the world are the poorest people in the world. You know, the people who have to get up at 5 in the morning and be at the bus stop by 6:30, and then they work 18 hours, and then they come home and they walk home. You know, some of the hardest working people in the world are poor people, middle class people. But we've been so conditioned in America to believe that if we are broke, it's because we did something wrong, or because we are morally bankrupt, or, you know, we should have got married. And I talked about this on my bonus show this week. Getting married does not fix poverty. Okay, anybody who told you that is a damn lie. Ask me how I know. Getting married doesn't fix poverty. And then even if you get married and you have two incomes, that does not necessarily fix living check to check, right? And here's the reality of it, right? We should not even look at income in America. Income is irrelevant. We have to look at what's left after your expenses, because once you're married and you get a partner who works just like you work, and you happen to have children, then all of a sudden your money is gone out the window. I'm not making it rain. This is money going out the damn window because of childcare. We don't have universal childcare in this country, right? So you could be married, and conservatives told us that if you get married, then you won't be in poverty. Okay, you're not in poverty, but you're in the middle class. You make $40,000 a year. Maybe the two of you together make $50,000 a year, but you have a family, and with a family comes a brand new set of expenses. And out of $50,000 a year, you spend $60,000 a year. So you may not be in the category of being in poverty, but you're just as broke, just as poor as someone in poverty who might have nothing. Well, hell, I've got negative nothing. That didn't make sense, but you know what I mean, right? At the end of the year, I'm in the negative. Then, if you go one step further, because I want to help you, we have to expose this devil. One thing I learned in church is if you're going to get rid of a devil, you got to expose that thing. Then, if you move one step further up, and this is the category that I'm in, right? We move up and down, back and forth. The category I'm in is where you get ambitious and you start making some money, right? And then all of a sudden, you're making money in a city that's expensive as hell to live in, but you're an independent contractor. So now at the end of the year, you've got nothing, but you owe the IRS money. These are all the different levels of being screwed in America, where the tax code is not designed to benefit anyone who is either in poverty, right outside of poverty, living paycheck to paycheck, or ambitious, and you know, not that everyone else is not ambitious, but you out there hustling, working 2 or 3 jobs, you got some contracts on the side, and now all of a sudden, damn, we ain't got no money left, but we owe the government. None of these tax policies that the Democrats leave in play, right? I'm not going to give the Democrats a pass here. They leave this structure in place, and now Republicans want to further exacerbate that. And so I'm arguing with this conservative who already admitted that he's poor and ain't got no money about the estate tax. And now he's saying that we shouldn't punish success. And that buys right into this idea that if you're wealthy, you worked for it. But if you're poor, that means you didn't work hard enough. Somewhere along the lines, we have got to start convincing enough people that part of poverty is structural. The vast majority of living paycheck to paycheck is 100%, I would argue 100% structural. It is structured where your rent is going to be so much of everything that you make, so that by the time you pay rent, you barely have enough for that pay cycle. Then you get in that pay cycle, you hit the overdraft. Here comes Bank of America and Wells Fargo to hit you with $200 of overdraft fees. And so the next time you get your paycheck direct deposited, that's the whole game with direct deposit. We need to go back to paper checks so you can go to the check cashing store. But it's structural. It's a vicious cycle. It's a vicious cycle. And reality of it is that if you're single and you make over a certain amount of money and you don't have the responsibility of raising children and you don't have the responsibility that comes with marriage, then you might be in a better position than everyone else who was told that if you get married, you can get out of poverty. So it's a lie of conservatism. It's a conservative lie that is used to continuously justify why we should never do anything to address the structural nature of poverty in America. And not just poverty based on the poverty line, which I believe is like $25,000 or $24,000 for a family of four. Who the hell can, that's beyond poverty. I'm talking about the poverty of living paycheck to paycheck, where you might make $50,000 a year, but just your cost of living alone robs you of at least $40,000 of that every year. All right, anyway, I've said my piece. I got to go see what's wrong with my voice. Trap. Melody Dixon says trap. Absolutely. The poor have nothing now, and they're probably living on debt. Reasons for poverty from Cheryl Lynn Brown. The link says it's not found, but I believe it's all in there. Brenda Lee Williams joined. Hey, Brenda. All right, folks, that's all I've got for this morning. I actually do have more, but I got to go get something on my voice because I got to talk for the next 8 hours, and then I will see you. Listen, Monday, you got my word. Stick with me. I know it's been a long transition. I've been in and out, up and down, doing shows, not doing shows, but Monday night, we are back in full effect. I finally got my studio finished at home, and we're going to be doing the regular Benjamin Dixon Show at night. The time may change from 9 to 8, but that won't change until later on. I will do a lot of announcements and let you know when, how, and where. But Monday night, full phone calls in my little studio at home so that we can keep doing the Benjamin Dixon Show, where we do the long format, deep dive conversations. You can call in and chime in. And during the day, you can check me out here at Content News, where we do all the made for TV stuff. Hey, have a great Friday, and I will see you all on Monday.